Good morning. Welcome to the morning meeting. I'm Mark Halperin with Dan and Sean, and we have some late breaking news. Moments ago, the Atlantic magazine, after some back and forth, released the full text exchange from that signal exchange related to the U.S. military strike against the Houthis. We're going to talk about that. And if you like news and breaking news, you've come to the right place. Good morning, gentlemen. Let me run through the day book real quick. Then we'll look at some of the excerpts from the attack plans, as the Atlantic is calling them. And as you can see, this ran within the last hour. And the White House asked them not to release it, taking the position that this is not top secret or classified information, rather, but information that nonetheless they didn't want to release. So we'll talk about it in a minute. Let me run through the schedule real quick, and then we'll get right to it. The president has one public event today scheduled currently 3 p.m. in the East Room. Participates in a Women's History Month event. Caroline Leavitt's supposed to brief at 1 o'clock. The vice president has an event today at 10 a.m. He's supposed to speak at the Marine Corps base at Quantico. Kristi Noem is in El Salvador. Wes Moore is giving a speech commemorating the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge today. And on the Hill, there's lots going on. Here are some of the highlights. No votes in the House because of the funeral of, you'll help me, Dan, Raul.
Grijalva of Arizona.
Grijalva, thank you. House Intelligence Committee at 10 a.m. is hearing from roughly the same roster that the Senate Intelligence Committee heard from yesterday. So you can expect that the Democratic members of that committee will have scooped up the Atlantic story. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of back and forth in that hearing, originally scheduled to talk overall about the U.S. intelligence community's view of threats around the world, to focus on whether they think the stuff in the Atlantic chain, which presumably is authentic, but that'll be a question too, whether that information was properly shared on Signal. CBO at 10 a.m. releases its estimate of when the debt limit will be breached. The ranges I've seen go from July to the fall, so not very meaningful, but we'll see what they say. Chuck Schumer, press conference at noon with some of his colleagues, Democratic senators, on Social Security. And Ro Khanna and Summer Lee are having a press conference on their bill at 2 o'clock, banning super PACs from giving in federal elections. So came in assuming that we'd kind of clean up the Signal story, because I think a lot of us thought it was in some ways fading after the president on Tuesday said all was forgiven with the National Security Advisor. The National Security Advisor said that he didn't know Jeffrey Goldberg, and the intelligence community said it was okay to use Signal. So, Paul, do we have any of the excerpts available yet?
We do.
Okay, so let's put one up. Again, this question will be, was this an appropriate conversation to have on Signal? Here is the National Security Advisor saying, building collapsed, had multiple positive ID, and praises his colleagues. So that seems to me not classified in terms of the actual information, but in the context of the timing, it's not something that you would want our enemies to see, I would say. Dan, what do you think of that one? And Paul, you'll put up more as you have them. Dan, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if those people that he references are colleagues or targets. That was not clear to me. Look, going into this morning, what I was going to say is the question is, was there classified info, and was Signal approved for such information? That neither the CIA nor the Defense Department have spoken on that specific point. And
on which point?
Yeah, the CIA did.
The CIA did not say if classified information, I thought, could travel on Signal. They said people could use it, but they did not say I believe. So
here's another one. We don't know what the Pentagon, at least I don't know what the Pentagon's policy is. They seem to not be as favorable towards using Signal as the White House is, and as the Pentagon and as the intelligence community is, including the CIA. Now, here's one from Hegseth. CENTCOM is on point. Great job, all. More strikes ongoing for hours tonight, and we'll provide full initial report tomorrow, but on time, on target, and good rated so far. I will say that if this is as far as it goes, I think the White House will escape this. This is not a battle plan. Okay. All right, Sean, what do you think of this one? This one okay for you?
Battle. I mean, that's not even a battle. That's not even a battle damage assessment. That's literally, hey, good job, kudos. Bravo Zulu.
Okay, let's keep going. Susie Wiles says kudos one. All good. No one's going to object to emojis. Go up. Okay.
Yeah, wait. 2 prayer hands If you collect 2 prayer hands
Yeah.
and a muscle,
Yeah.
oh God,
Paul,
look at that.
Paul, let's
And
Paul,
2
let's go up.
flags.
Paul,
When
go
they're,
up.
when they're
Go up.
together,
Go up.
that's a
Go up.
problem.
Go up.
All
Sean,
right.
sarcasm notwithstanding. Let's go
Yeah,
up.
keep going.
Oh, wait, they
going.
did a great job. Oh God.
Okay. So far, it's
How is
okay.
this?
So far, it's okay.
And then some ads.
No, keep going.
Okay. All right. Well, that one, go down. That one's not great. Go down.
No,
Go
no,
down. Okay. Their
Yep.
top missile, their first target, their top missile guy. We had positive idea of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and now it's collapsed.
So
Sean,
now, if that guy is not dead, he knows he's a target, and he knows
Sean,
who they're going
Sean,
after.
Sean, you okay with that?
Right now, nothing. I mean, I don't see anything.
I'm asking a question. I'm asking a question.
No,
Are you
I don't.
comfortable
I
with
mean,
that being on signal?
yes, I'm fine.
Fine. Okay. Keep going up.
So that is where I'm not sure if those people are colleagues or references to who they're going after.
No, those are colleagues. Those are
Okay, I didn't know who
colleagues.
Carilla
Right.
is.
Those are
All right.
kudos.
All right,
Pete,
okay.
Gorilla, I see. Amazing job.
Is that the whole thing?
No. The target stuff is up about what they're doing with specific weaponry and timing. Yeah, here we go.
Okay. Stop right here. Stop right here.
And then there's more of it.
Sean, yeah, more up or down, Dan?
Up. I believe it's up again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going up. Go up to where this part starts.
Yeah,
All right,
there
team
it's the
update.
team
Here we
update.
go.
Yeah, this is where it
Okay.
starts.
Okay, keep going. So he says we're go for a mission. So he's announcing on signal that the mission's on.
Yep.
Wouldn't want our enemies to know that. He's saying F-18s are launching, saying what we're using.
And again, Steve Witkoff was in the Kremlin in
Well, but
Russia.
the White House said this morning he was on a secure phone.
They did not
Hold
say
on,
he
stop.
was on secure-
They did. They said he was on a secure phone. They said one phone with him, and it was a secure phone provided by the government in Russia.
They didn't. I mean, all I'm saying, Mark, is they did not say, and he was using it for this exchange.
He says the only phone he had, Dan.
Well,
Okay, so Sean, what do you think of this? This seems to me to be inappropriate to put on signal.
So again, let's go back to the premise of this, which is if you go to the Radcliffe testimony from yesterday, where he is saying that it was installed and allowed, then it's I mean, so this is like if this were on the high side, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The point is, if the system is authorized to use it, which is what Radcliffe said yesterday in front of the Senate, I see.
He said it was authorized to use it. I talked, forget what Radcliffe said because he wasn't as specific. My reporting with someone who understands this intelligence community's position, not the White House and not the Pentagon, is you can use it to set up meetings, to share clips for non-sensitive information. That's the policy, as I understand it, of the intelligence community. This is, and we don't know what the Pentagon policy is, but I'd be hard pressed to believe the Pentagon policy was loose enough to allow for this.
So generally,
How could defend this being on signal?
Right. So
put it back up, Paul. Put it back up, please.
Is the future is what the problem is. So past battle damage assessments, right? That's what's happened in the past. If you're putting out what's happening in the future, strike zones on target. Okay, so you're still not telling anyone where they are. You're just...
Sean, this is when the first bombs will definitely drop. That's the future.
Right. No, that's what I said. If you're talking about the future, that's where you get problematic because you're going into a future strike, right? We just like, you don't talk about.
So I'll say again, if Susan Rice or Tony Blinken or Jake Sullivan was on signal talking to administration colleagues about an ongoing operation and what's going to happen next on signal, what would your posture be?
I'd ask the same questions. Was it authorized? Were they able to do it? And then secondly, look, I mean, let's just be honest though. Strike zones on target. Okay, that tells you nothing about the location or where they're going. Is it helpful to know that something's coming? Sure. But if you don't know where it's going to happen, that's the real sensitive part.
Okay. Let's say, Sean, 4 junior officers were having this conversation on signal. Would you say that they should be indicted if during a military operation?
If they weren't, no. So it all comes down to, were you authorized to do it? This is you're missing
authorized
the point.
Authorized by whom?
So if you're asking if a junior officer was having the conversation, were they in a position to be authorized to discussing those? Were they given clearance to discuss? I mean, all of that matters.
Who would have to give Pete
their higher headquarters, whoever their direct report was that had the authorization to do that? So you can't just, it's not a rank issue.
Okay.
It's not a,
So,
if a junior, if they didn't have permission to do it and they walked outside and had this conversation, then absolutely.
So Pete Hegseth could say, as Secretary of Defense, I'm declassifying this. So it's not classified, so he can't be indicted. But you think it's a good idea for this stuff to be shared on Signal? Just a matter of policy and practice.
So like I said, I don't think it's ever good to tell someone what you're doing in the future. Ever. Like we don't discuss ship movements for all those kind of reasons, right? You never want but when you look at the context of this, strike drones on target. Okay, if you don't know where the target is it good? No. Is it horrible? No. This doesn't tell you anything except for strike drones.
It tells our enemies we were using sea-based Tomahawks.
Hold on a second. And there's another thing here. There is an enemy, sworn enemy of the United States in Iran that backs the Houthis. If they had hacked Signal, okay, nobody has come out and said it is permitted for classified sensitive information. The fact that we are
to the contrary, people
hold on, we are 48 hours out. I worked for a Clinton, right? Sean, you worked in Washington. You know words matter. There is no way the counsel's office is sitting around like, oh, do I need to put that out? I was unaware that this needs to be. The silence is deafening. If the Iranians knew that the group chat name is Houthi, whatever it is, text chain, right? So it doesn't take an Einstein to figure out who the target is. If the Iranians hack the phones, they could tip off the leaders of the Houthis, who whatever could go to a stronger hut to try to take cover. So to say that this doesn't matter is absurd. And if a Democrat did this, there would literally be calls for treason.
Like I said, I don't think
you understand.
Actually, I'm not saying it is good. I'm not saying it is helpful. I'm just saying that there's a difference between telling people what's going on, which again, I'm not excusing, I'm not condoning, but there is a difference between that and this is where the strike will happen.
Sure.
Well, there is a difference, but the question is what's on here appropriate? I get that you're saying it'd be worse if it said, here's what we're doing next, although it does say that in at least one instance. But forget whether this is the worst possible thing. I'll just ask one more time because I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious in your view. Do you think it's appropriate to have that conversation on Signal?
No, I would rather have that happen on the high side. There's a reason that there's a process for this, right? Yeah. So, no, I don't think, there's a reason that we set up skiffs. There's a reason we have red phones. There's a reason we do this. And so do I, to your point, I've said this before. I don't think there's a difference in the nomenclature, whether it's classified or even sensitive, right? So in the military, there's a big thing called PII, which is your personal information, right? Identifiable information. Even that you're not supposed to discuss. Like, so you can't combine someone's birthday so that somebody on the outside can figure out who that person is and hack them and implicate them, right? So anything from PII up, you shouldn't be having those discussions. So, is it helpful? No. I think there's a spectrum though of outrage that needs to be calibrated.
I think there will be more to come now.
Okay. So
well, I will say this. If we want to look at the political piece of this, Democrats had their shot yesterday. And I honestly, for all of the fervor, I actually think if you're a Democrat, you have to be rather disappointed in how Democrats handled themselves at the Senate Intelligence Committee yesterday.
Why is that?
They didn't lay a glove on the guys.
Yeah, but actually, I disagree. They are smart people. They were very careful with their words, and now they're going to get picked apart. So, again, it's very Clintonian, right? It's often, and I go back to to Senator Cotton. It was what he didn't say and then refused all day to come out and clarify, which he absolutely would have if it was an honest omission, speaks volumes. So I think it's just, for Democrats, we are still on offense on this.
They weren't perfect yesterday, but they were, to me, much better than the norm. And I'll say my strong sense is, having not read it all, but seeing what we just showed, is anyone, including people who've come on this community who've been Trump voters who've come on this platform, anyone who thinks that the use of Signal was cavalier, reckless, dangerous, and arrogant, I think have had their instincts confirmed. And that's separate from how Jeffrey Goldberg got on the chain. I don't think any again, Sean, I say respectfully, I don't think anyone could look at what they put on Signal and say fair-mindedly that that's something that should have been on Signal. I just don't think anybody could say that's fair. And that validates what the Democrats said yesterday. They said, show us what was on the chain,
Well,
and
that's,
we will say it wasn't appropriate. And I think that's what they'll say.
yeah, I think that to me was sort of the other silly thing. I mean, to say, show us all your emails, that's a little bit of a cute game there, right? I mean, you want to go down that chain. They're asking for trouble going forward.
All right. So a couple options here. We could open the floor for questions and comments on this topic. I'm sure most of the hands up are about this. Or we could go on to other topics. Guys, what do you want to do? I'm kind of
I'll make two quick things since we've dominated this with this story. Is I think yesterday the president made two huge executive orders, one on voting, securing our voting, and the other one on electronic payments. And frankly, this is why, if I were President Trump, I'd continue to be a little pissed off, because he's doing some big things, both in terms of reforming the government and tightening election integrity, that I have a feeling that he really wanted to be able to talk about, that are being overshadowed. And I think the one on election integrity, as far as I'm concerned, was huge. He really continues to fight for something. For a guy who's not up for re-election, he understands the importance of election integrity and continued to fight for the security of our elections going forward.
Or I'll just say on that front, you know what? He also got lucky because consumer confidence hit a 12-year low, and there were more economic signs of anxiety building in the marketplace. They lost a special election in a Trump district in Pennsylvania. Like, the bad news giveth and taketh.
All right, let's talk about one more aspect of the Signal story, and then let's do other topics quickly, and then we'll open up the floor. There's still this question of Jeffrey Goldberg and how he got on the chain. And there's some people who say it couldn't be an accident. The most detested reporter in the Trump White House, how could he have been the one who got on? It just seems to some people like too big a coincidence that it wasn't an accident. So let's show 104, please. This is Laura Ingraham pressing National Security Advisor Waltz about whether he knows Jeffrey Goldberg or not.
So they want to focus on this. It's embarrassing, right. Yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone. And we're going to figure out how this happened.
So you don't know what staffer is responsible for this right now?
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
So,
all right. So I don't typically like much speculation where we don't really know. But Sean, do you think he knows Jeffrey Goldberg at all or not? And if not, how could he have gotten on the chat?
So here's what the thing that I find fascinating about this is, if you're going to go out and say you don't know him, right, then that's either, like, if you're Jeffrey Goldberg, it's either demonstrably false or not, right? So if you're Goldberg, you go, here's 5 other texts where we're going back and forth, or here's a picture of me and him at, some event, whatever. Like, so if you're going to make a statement like that, you better be able to back it up. And I assume Mike Waltz is a smart guy. So I assume that barring some like major event that the two can be seen together at, which means nothing in Washington, that he means that when he says it. That being said, I still don't get what he like. That's sort of my question. How does that happen? Like, I have Jeffrey Goldberg's number. I'll admit, right, because I told you guys that anecdote the other day from 25. I had to call him about the story that his person had screwed up on. So that's why when I went through and looked at it and did it myself, because I was like, how does this, like, trying to recreate it my own self. I went into Signal. If you have someone in your contacts list, at least from what I can tell, I'm not the most tech savvy guy. It seems that it populates your current contact list with your signal, into your signal, right? So if I have Dan Turrentine or Mark Halperin in my regular contacts, when you open Signal, it has imported all that. But at some point or another, you've had to have had that person in there, right? And they're appearing, in that signal chain as JG, Jeffrey Goldberg. So it's not like Jeffrey Goldberg's number was Dan Turrentine's number. And it right. So, which is what he seemed to indicate. So I don't get that. That's where I'm still trying to figure that part out.
Dan, can you address those two questions? Do you think he knows Jeffrey Goldberg? And how could this have happened?
I think he does know him. And of course, depends what your definition of know is, which is always, again, a very Clintonian thing. Look, I think there's two things. If you want to be really generous to Mike Walls, most members of Congress, their schedulers, sometimes their chief of staff, have access to their right. contacts. And you put contacts in your boss's stuff. So if you get to know a journalist or a major constituent or whatever, you'll populate it so the boss has it. So it is possible somebody over his career recently put Jeffrey Goldberg's contact in his contacts. And to Sean's point, if I went to text Sean Spicer and I had a Sean Spider SS, like you're moving fast.
That guy is a jerk.
And yeah, not as good looking as you though. And look, I have dyslexia. Like I have done stuff like that more times than I can count. That is your optimistic view. The other side is his face kind of freezes when she presses him about how did this happen. And what he said is, I sent it to the wrong contact. I would think you would say, I have no idea how that got in there. Like, I'm mortified. Instead, he kind of tries to tap dance. And again, I go back to they're super smart guys. What they don't say and what they don't clarify often tells you where the truth may lay.
Well, the one thing I'll say on this is that, as you can imagine, the one thing that in my conversations that I think President Trump is really pissed more than anything else, and you referenced this, is who got it. Yeah. And so if Goldberg comes out with text chains showing that they did communicate, that's going to change this thing big time, right? And that's sort of where I think the problem lies, is that if you're going to make a statement like that on Laura Ingraham, then you better hope that there's nothing in there that shows that, because that's where the president, I think, will lose it.
Hey, Paul, is that Jeff Goldberg live on MSNBC?
And, parentheses, except for the fact that you're mistakenly sending this to the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic.
And in a Safeway parking lot. In a Safeway parking lot, a grocery run delayed there for Jeffrey. But the pushback from the White House the last 24 hours has been, there's nothing classified here. There's nothing, there's sensitive. And this morning, it seems to be quibbling over a word, that the Atlantic deemed this war plans, and they're calling it an attack plan. That is the defense from the White House press secretary this morning.
Well, these war plans.
And attack plans, and both should be classified. So there's no issue here.
Yeah, so Jeffrey, let me ask you if you could switch hats for 1 minute. And we thank you so much for being here and giving us this information. You've got the vice chairman, obviously, of the Senate Intel Committee with you, Mark Warner. What would you like to ask him as a journalist, as a reporter?
Well, I mean, the questions I would ask any member of the Senate Intel Committee is this. We know, I mean, and Senator Warner obviously knows this, that, let's say, junior Army officers, junior Air Force officers, CIA case officers, State Department officials operate under extreme operational security guidelines, right? They're constantly trained and retrained in cybersecurity. We know even at the embassy level, security officers go through people's offices at night looking for classified information that people might have left on the desk. You could get punished for doing that. You could lose your job. You could be kicked out of the Army for that. You can go to prison for that. So the question is, if there are serious consequences for the rank and file across the American national security complex, what kind of consequences need to be put in place, or are there consequences when the leaders, the supervisors of those people make the same mistakes, or actually, in a way, more consequential mistakes?
Well, Jeffrey, I would add one other
piece of that. We had two witnesses yesterday basically say
This is a top Democrat on the
no
Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark
attack
Warner.
plans, war plans. Clearly, they didn't either read the text or they didn't tell the truth. You had Hegseth launching a personal attack against you, denying as well. So you not only have the lack of willingness to acknowledge they screwed up, you then have complete disinformation, misinformation about the content. And I can tell you, this is not a close call. You would be fired. And then to add insult to injury, Gabbard 12 days ago went on a long tweet screech about, any leakers were going to pursue to the end of the full extent of the law. This constant, you heard some of the same things from Patel. Will those standards they lay out apply to these senior members? And it goes back to the question that was asked earlier. All of the Democrats will agree, but this should not be partisan. The Intelligence Committee, I've prided the fact when I was chair or vice chair, it's always bipartisan. I just hope and pray that my colleagues who I know care about national security will find their voice and condemn this and call for results, call for a few heads to roll, because otherwise we just sanction this behavior. And not only does it demoralize the men and women of the intel community, but what does our allies do? Do you think Mossad or MI6 or any of our other allies are going to share intelligence with us if this is how it's treated?
Yeah, Senator, let me ask you an uncomfortable question. You have shared leadership of the committee with Senator Marco Rubio, a senator that when he was nominated to be Secretary of State, we all sat around this table, and I know you probably said the same thing, which was there's some things we may disagree with Senator Rubio on, but he would be a good pick for Secretary of State, given the fact that he had worked so effectively with you and others. And as we have pointed out from time to time,
Paul, switch over to Fox.
When it was necessary to criticize.
Sean, is Rick Crawford a big Trump supporter?
Push back on that. We've got to provide alternatives.
I think he's not probably top of the magazine list.
Ukraine,
but
Russia is going to become a topic of conversation today. Russia continues to be something that's on our radar screen, obviously, every day. Iran, North Korea, all of that. Plus,
okay, take that down, please. Thank you, Paul, for bringing it up. Sean, reactions to what Goldberg and Warner said.
So Dean in the chat was actually just noting what we had been discussing earlier, which I think is interesting. Goldberg did an interview yesterday where he says that he only twice in his life, and definitely not recently, within a few years, had actually interacted with Waltz at some point, which doesn't give any. But so I mean, I guess that still begs the question: how do you end up in the contacts list? Because if Goldberg himself is saying, maybe once or twice a few years ago, I interacted with him, which again, in DC, there's a difference. To Dan's point, I think saying, hey, we're at the same cocktail party or at a briefing at one point isn't exactly knowing somebody. But I will say that continues to be something that should be, looked at. Like, how does this guy end up in your contact list?
Yeah.
Because and then I mean, look, I think we can all admit there was someone else attended, a JG. Someone suggested Jamison Greer, the trade rep. I don't think that's probably maybe, I don't know, but there's somebody that was intended to be in there that probably has a JG or a JJ or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you did have the Treasury Secretary on, and they were concerned about Europe, and so the trade rep is involved with that. Witkoff just put out a statement criticizing somewhat mildly the Wall Street Journal, saying he was not on the chat while he was in Russia. He did have a government phone. He didn't use any of his personal devices while he was in Russia for the security reasons, and that his activity in the chat only occurs after he leaves Russia. So that's his story. Dan, do you want to react to the Morning Joe stuff at all?
Yeah, two things I'll just say again, and I've worked for Clinton. He didn't respond to the chat, but was he monitoring the chat? And that's all you need to upload software potentially. But look, Mark Warner's a smart guy. He is no bomb thrower. He's a moderate. He is up for re-election. He is nervous about running in Virginia, given Trump's progress in that state. I go back to, no one has said from the Trump administration that Signal was approved for classified information. Mark Warner just seemed to say.
But I think Hegseth's going to say it wasn't classified, because if he puts it out, it's not classified.
Well, I mean, look, if that's what you're going to try to do, say it's a battle plan.
That's not what I'm going to try to do. I think it's what
no.
I
know. I don't mean you. I mean the Trump administration.
Yeah.
I think Mark Warner's right. In a normal circumstance, people would lose their jobs, and certainly there needs to be, I think, some admitting, like, hey, we screwed up. I actually think if people in the Trump administration just came out and said, we screwed up, this was a mistake, we're not going to do it again, and use Signal for this, I think most Americans would move on.
I think you're right, but I also say with a fairly high degree of confidence, although I'm not in Green Bay currently, that, as I said before, unless you are really determined to give them a full pass, and Sean didn't give them a full pass, you can't give them a pass on that. That not only on the content, but on how they characterized it yesterday. I don't think you can slough off what was on there and say there wasn't anything to that was dangerous to be revealed. All right, quickly, true rapid round, like 1-2 sentences each, and then let's open it up. Republicans yesterday, Thune and Johnson, who seem to have a very good relationship at the White House, made an agreement. They're going to try to raise the debt ceiling within the reconciliation process. That will lose some votes, but I think on balance, from people I talked to, it's certainly the best of the options. Sean, is this a good idea? And what's the plan B if it doesn't work?
Generally, there isn't a plan B. This is the plan. And I think there has to be, because they recognize that the ship already sailed on trying to get something through before. And now they either do it in the context of reconciliation, or Democrats are going to have a vehicle to get something for, right? And that's the problem. They know that they have gone with the go it alone strategy, and they're stuck with it.
Dan.
Yep. Congress lives by deadlines. This is the ultimate deadline. No one wants to default. It'll force action.
It will.
I will say it will be interesting to see how Andy Harris and the Freedom Caucus come out. They've been on board so far. Well, look, and the one thing I noted, April 1st, you pick up 2 more Republican votes in the House, presumably. And that's gonna, if you lose 1 or 2, it's not helpful, but
I've been thinking about this all morning. I don't really know what my final thought on it is, but it is a forcing mechanism. It is an absolute deadline, but it's a deadline that some Republicans in Congress don't take seriously. Some of them say, great, we can default, doesn't matter. And it also is a deadline that's not specific. As I said earlier in the program, it could be July or it could be November. So they'll have to have the Treasury Secretary work with them to really understand what the deadline is, to kind of back time to the deadline, so they don't go over the cliff because they don't know exactly when it is.
Well,
right?
they're gonna believe him more, right? So I mean, to your point, it's called extraordinary measures that they can use, and you're going to believe your own team more than the other team, just by nature. The other thing that's going to be fascinating is that this is all predicated.
Sorry, just on that. Okay, I understand what you're saying. You're going to believe your own team. So he says it's September 1, right? I run out of extraordinary measures, or I'm not going to exercise extraordinary measures, because the extraordinary measures have costs to them, right? You can say that's the deadline, but deadlines involve a game of chicken, even with your own team. So I say, okay, it's September 1, and there's no deal by September 1. Well, then he can say, oh, I just found some nickels in the cushions at the Treasury Department. It's actually September 10th. That's why I worry about them for this deadline. It's not a hard deadline. It's so fungible, not just not predictable, but fungible by the Treasury Secretary.
Correct. But it's also, I mean, part of that fungibility is going to be predicated on what comes in April in terms of tax revenue. And that's huge, right? So if you come in less, I mean, this is where April 15th is going to be a big day for the Trump administration, because if you come in short of projections as far as what you brought, that either opens or closes your window. But I will say that President Trump is going to say to his guys, hey, listen, if I give you a deadline, I don't need to find out if we're wrong on September 2nd if I say it's September 1st. Like, don't screw with it. There's a little difference here. I think Trump's got a lot more hammer.
In some ways it's better. In some ways it's better. In some ways it's worse. And Sean, I'm sorry if I interrupted and you still had a second point.
Nope.
Okay. Dan.
I mean, I agree. It's a deadline. I do not think anything of the House guys. There is no way Andy Harris goes toe to toe with Donald Trump and MAGA if this is what it comes down to. The Senate is a little more interesting because people have longer leashes, but I think they'll end up ramming this through unless that, unless they hit 8 trillion in tax cuts. I think the only thing really to watch is, can they get away with saying that extending the Trump tax cuts cost nothing? I mean, it's a total
issue. It's a big
total
issue.
BS, but
Yep.
if they get away with it.
But it's going to be our own, it's going to be the Republicans that call them out on that, right?
I agree.
You're not, they don't have to, like, this is where they're going to have their own problem.
Yeah. All right. Two other issues real quick, and one deserves a longer discussion, but we keep delaying it. But Witkoff, like, my view continues to be, don't judge him now, judge him by whether he lands these 2 deals. But it seems like he's done productive work. He has the confidence of the president. He seems very smart. Many people didn't like what he said to Tucker about Russia. But this morning, both the Wall Street Journal editorial board and David Ignatius go after him pretty hard. Caroline Levitt defended him this morning, 105. He is a very good friend of the president, and so he's going to be defended by the apparatus for sure. And he tweeted a little while ago, as I said, expressing disappointment in the Journal. Here's Caroline's tweet. Witkoff is a deal maker. That's why he's up there. I provide a secure line. The Journal board didn't call me. Fake news, etc. Okay, so Dan, why does the foreign policy establishment, as personified by the Journal Ed board, David Ignatius and many others, why don't they like Witkoff? Why are they singling him out for criticism? They're basically saying he's in over his head and he's incompetent. Why are they doing that?
I think because they see him as a transactional real estate developer and not kind of the foreign policy school. And one of the things that Witkoff is showing so far is kind of flattery, that, as you said, when he went on Tucker and he kind of repeated some of Putin's talking points. And look, you can say that being a deal maker and not being of the establishment is a good thing. And I think there's probably some truth to that. The flip side is, when you represent the government, you need to be sensitive about what you say versus if you're just a deal maker trying to get a deal in private and you don't really care. So I think to them, there's less polish. Again, some people may like it, and I think the establishment doesn't, and just says he doesn't really get what the role of representing the United States government is versus, trying to get a deal with JP Morgan.
Sean.
Yeah, I generally agree. I mean, I think what a lot of these folks despise is people that are not part of the club, right? If you're not part of their mentality of thinking about how the whole world's supposed to work, and that there's supposed to be a process of PowerPoint presentations and a series of meetings that evolve into, then you're not one of them, and that they're going to critique your style. I am more, as I've said all along, I sort of look at the outcome. I think Witkoff is making progress. He talked about the stuff in the Black Sea yesterday, where it seems like there's progress on both sides. Both Ukraine and Russia agreed to stuff. We'll see if it keeps. But look, I as long as we're moving the ball forward towards a settled peace that is one that is respectable, then I'm fine.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, and again, we're going to keep returning to this topic, and we need a fuller conversation. Democratic grassroots. You could be the most well-funded, experienced, engaged, energetic reporter possible. And I don't think it's possible to measure the Bernie AOC tour, the other protests we've seen, some other kind of grassroots movements burbling up, some people from the progressive wing or the outsider wing announcing primary challenges to Democrats. Dan, just where are you now on if this is a sideshow or significant? Where do you see that going in terms of being part of, or maybe the foundation for, a Democratic comeback?
Look, I've been writing about this now the last couple of days on Substack. I think this is great. Like, I think the change is going to come within the party from the bottom up. What you're getting is new energy, new candidates, and hopefully we're going to soon now get new ideas. I think the establishment is just fatigued. They're exhausted from 9 years of battling Trump. They can't believe they just lost in 2024. And like, this happens in Europe. That's, why they go through prime ministers, because you kind of give it your shot. If it doesn't work and you kind of tire out, it's like next man or woman up. And so, look, do I love that AOC and Sanders are front and center? Their ideology is not necessarily mine, and some of what they say I don't agree with, but I think it's fantastic. And I will just say, because it just was published, that the St. Pete Tribune published a poll in the Florida special race. Randy Fine leads by 3.5 points in a district that Trump won by about 20. Now, that is not a partisan poll, could be wrong, but I will take that.
And Democrats won a seat in Pennsylvania yesterday in a district they hadn't won in 147 years in a state legislative race.
And I go to this woman challenging Jan Schakowsky. She is 26. Jan Schakowsky's been in the House for 26 years and is 80 years old. Maybe Jan rises to the occasion, but young, like nimble, aggressive flamethrowers, that's what we need. Because if you're an incumbent, like, step up your game. Show us you still got a fastball. Show us that you can kick somebody's butt and now go take on Trump. And if you can't, goodbye.
Sean.
CNN's got a new poll up. Who best reflects the core values of the Democratic Party? Gavin Newsom, 2%. Jasmine Crockett, 4%. Barack Obama, 4%. Hakeem Jeffries, I think 6% rather. Bernie Sanders, 8%. Kamala Harris, 10%. AOC, 10%. That doesn't, I mean, if I don't really.
What do you know? Was it open ended or were those the choices?
I haven't, I'll go look at the crosstab, but that was everyone I don't see somebody jumping out that says this is the person. I mean, AOC obviously at the top.
That Obama number is incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
But it just tells you that this is a party looking for a leader right now.
Look, I think we will be a different party in 28 than we have been the last 20 years. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but we're going through change, and amen.
Dario, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Well, I live in Coral Gables, Florida. I teach political science at Florida International University.
Great school.
Mercy was a student of mine, Mercy Schott, and I done a lot of interviews with Mark Caputo over the years. And I taught political science with Marco Rubio over the last 14 years.
So you're slumming it on two ways, what you're saying.
I find your platform one of the best shows on that I can find on politics.
Thank you.
I love the interaction. I love your guests. My question is about what's happening in academia. I've been a professor for 40 years. Freedom of speech is very important to me. I've had students come. I had the local Democratic Party bust into my class with megaphones one time. But I've always stand up for freedom of speech. And my question is to Sean and Dan. What can the universities do to save themselves? It looks to me like the universities over the last 20 years have lost a consensus that kept them well-funded and well-respected. And at the end of the day, whatever you think of the universities, they play an important role in American power and American prestige. So what can we do? If you were advising a university president in this atmosphere, what would be the advice?
My advice would be that your university, its faculty and student body should represent America. And I think for too many universities, it is a 90-10, 95-5 progressive and even almost left of progressive ideology, certainly in the Ivy Leagues and kind of these elite universities. But I would say, if your faculty is 50%, I don't know if it'd be MAGA per se, but like Republican and understanding of the MAGA viewpoint, and you teach it and you're receptive of students, and you're also, then I think you're on safer grounds. But I think the idea of right and wrong, and right is Democrats, almost like European Democrats, and wrong is anything else, is a losing strategy in the marketplace.
So there's two things. I did a lot of traveling for a while on university campuses, speaking to them as part of the Young Americans Foundation. And one of the first questions I was always asked is, how many conservatives in your time here, so seniors would have been 4 years, et cetera. How many conservatives have you ever welcomed on campus? In many cases, I was the first. In some cases, it was one or two others. And when those others came, from whether I was at Harvard or UC Berkeley or UPenn, I always traveled with a rather nice contingent of security, because the universities did very little. Their idea was what it took before they would deal with the situation basically would amount to, some form of violence. They allowed sort of disruptions. They allowed, and so I think the first thing that I would argue is invite more people, make it very clear that this is a place for learning and tolerance. That's the biggest issue, that they don't actually want that to happen. I think, Tim in the chat saying, yeah, Charlie Kirk is doing a great job of going to campuses and engaging with folks in dialogue, whether you like him or not. That's not that he is doing things that the universities themselves won't do. But it's unfortunate because back in the day when I was in school, yes, Republicans were banished and treated horribly, but at least we could go petition for funding for, a club if you wanted something. I think so. Most university presidents have got to learn to be leaders and to explain why kids are there and what the goal is, as opposed to kowtowing to everyone. And also, I think, frankly, there's a line between allowing people to speak out and express themselves in accordance with the Constitution and allowing kids to run, to run the place. When they take over buildings, when they storm, those are not acceptable forms. And there needs to be someone to show leadership. That's not leadership. So that would be number one. Number two is hire some people. It's not just allowing them, but there are no, to Dan's point, they might, if you're not even allowing a speaker, do you really think that you've got a professor there that's teaching or organizing? No. So they've got to make a commitment to, and this isn't about just now, they have really let down the future of America by how they've behaved. And the college presidents, I'm glad to see President Trump yanking the money from Columbia and everywhere else. These guys are not good stewards of money. They should never have gotten it in the first place. And I'm glad to see him defunding them, because there's a whole separate argument that you're not asking about, which is I think there needs to be wholesale reform. These guys literally live off bilking people for money, making student loans, making student education get more expensive. The cost of an education should not be that high. And it's not because the education's that good. It's because of all of the other crap that's getting thrown into it. So that's a bigger discussion, but I think the first thing would be to invite people and hire people.
Professor, great question. You're obviously an expert. I'm going to unmute you and just ask you what you thought of the answers you got from my colleagues.
I thought they were great, and I would add that I was the first Republican hired by the poli-sci department at Florida International. And
which, by the way, kudos to that. I went down and spoke there. Great university. I think your president's doing a fantastic job of trying to do exactly that.
And we're moving forward. And but I'm glad you guys are doing. Keep it up.
Can I just hold on? What he just said though is so profound. Think about this. We have two parties in this country, and you had the first Republican hired at a major university in the political science department. How backwards is that? That you have kids learning about, from no one that represents the other side.
And by the way, just a small point. Marco tells everybody that I was the radical in the class, that I was the party.
Professor, thank you. We hope you'll come back regularly. Very grateful to you for participating. Thank you.
Ironically, the Ivies 100 years ago were bastions of conservative thinking. They were.
They were. It's true. Lucky, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Hey, great show. I'm in Oklahoma City. I don't have a question per se, but I just want to say, after 30, I think it ended up being 37 years of in the Air Force, and then worked for a major defense contractor. Spent a lot of time on classified programs and classified discussions. Those folks know what they did was wrong, and they just have to find a way out to admit it without admitting it, I guess, because they just don't want to go to jail, don't want to lose their job, et cetera. But Sean, guys like me, we know what they did was wrong. We're just trying to tap dance around the things, but that's not really why I called. The real reason why I called was because.
I'm sorry. Before you leave that, are you a Trump supporter?
A
voter?
Yeah,
Trump
I did
voter?
vote for him.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm not MAGA true and blue because I can't stand his NATO, the way he attacks NATO. That's just silly. JD Vance's attitude about Europe is silly. So there are some things like I'll never support JD Vance now. The more I hear him, the less I like him. He's that view is not my view, but
Okay.
we did need a bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
So I supported Trump in that sense.
Did you vote for him all 3 times?
And we
Lucky?
got it. And
Did
I
you vote
think,
for him-
the
did-
pendulum
hold on,
swings.
hold on. Did you vote for him all 3 times in the general?
Yeah.
Okay. When you say they know it was wrong, just in your own words, what was wrong about it?
You just do not discuss. Yeah, he might be sec deaf, and those are all principal peoples, but there's no way folks who are in that position, let alone head of intelligence groups, alarm bells should be going off, even knowing when they're discussing things like future time events on what's going to happen. When you're talking about stuff that's going to happen in the future, not patting each other on the back about something that might have happened, you take that stuff into the skiff, you take that into the vault, that's on the high side. You just don't discuss operational matters.
How about revealing what weapons are being used? Is that also something you wouldn't do on a platform like that?
Not ahead of time, especially. No.
Well, but
I don't even care if
how about after the fact, saying, we just fired some Tomahawks?
Yeah, if that was on national news and stuff, if that was already reported or released in a formal public statement by the Pentagon, then of course you can.
No, I don't believe it had been.
Well, we do a lot of conjecture.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Jeffrey Goldberg
gonna...
says that he went to social media to see if what I'm reading happened, 30 minutes later, and it did. That's how he knew this was not a hoax.
Yeah. In any event, thank you for answering all that. Go ahead to your second topic, please. Lucky, go ahead.
Well, not topic, but my point is, so my real point is that I just want folks to know that you can support Trump and what he's doing, but you don't have to pretend like his attitude towards Europe and NATO and Ukraine is okay, because we all know that's BS. Can I ask
and that's my point. I want you to articulate, if you can, for a second. What is it that irks you about his stance on NATO?
Well, having been overseas for many years, living on a NATO base, those people, I'm not going to turn my brain off and pretend like we aren't partners, that we didn't make commitments to them, that being NATO economy, there are Russia is not our buddy. Russia is not anybody that anybody with a sane brain would start picking up and talking their talking points. Putin is just Trump. He's got 3 or 4 more years of Trump, and then he's playing the long game. He knows there's somebody else coming, and Putin and Russia are never going to be trusted by me. And I think anybody that's ever served any serious time in the military in Europe and is talking to the folks over there, gone not just on the bases, but go out in the country, do what you do.
Lucky, I'm sorry. Let me just. Here's what I get. I'm with you on this. Okay. But just tell me what you specifically said his stance on NATO. Is it that sounds more like that you have with him, how he treats Putin?
It's the package. There were other ways you could, like he talks about negotiations. Okay, well, you could have said a lot of that stuff about upping your commitment to NATO, your spend on NATO. You could have told them, hey, look, guys, here's the fact. We're in a major debt in America. We personally want to switch gears and go towards China. It's nothing new, but we really, really, really need to prepare for a potential war against China. Please take on the burden higher at NATO and higher burden of supporting Ukraine so we can pivot in a controlled manner without looking like we're panicking and just dumping on you guys, and pivot to the Pacific. There's ways you could have done that first before going all nuclear, which is how I look at how he's treated NATO and the NATO countries.
Yeah, so I mean, I respect your service and what I kind of look at it the other way, which is there was a deal with NATO, and we said we'll have your back if you agree to 2% of your GDP being put towards defense. And for years they said, why bother when you guys will just do it for us? So at some point,
we all know that. We all know that, and I admit that too. And I already told them it was effective, but it's a nuclear way to be effective in getting NATO to wake
and
up.
guess what? The non-nuclear way, and I know that we're all speaking, in hyperbole here, didn't work. They kept laughing at the United States and say, yeah, you'll have our back. Don't worry. We're going to spend our money on stuff.
If, I'm saying is if Trump is half the great negotiator you and other MAGA folks said he was, he could have first tried in this second go around, Trump 2.0, to be the nicer, kinder Trump towards NATO one last time, then
But
do what he did. That's all I'm saying.
Lucky, again, we respect you and really enjoying the conversation, but with respect, there's nothing in the public record that suggests that anything.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
There's nothing in the public record, with the exception in the last 50 years, that suggests that NATO would bend or change or accommodate the American request without very, very harsh measures. There's nothing to suggest it. And Trump doesn't want to destroy NATO. He wants it to be fair to the American taxpayers, and he wants it to be modernized, and he wants those countries to take more responsibility financially and operationally for their security. That's not hostile to NATO. That's pro-America, and it's pro-NATO as far as I'm concerned.
And I will say, too, I actually think that is the view of the Democratic base and a lot of working class Americans. It is more the armchair generals in the Excella corridor that did not want to change. And I actually think that this is one place that Trump deserves some credit. I'm not way that Paris and Berlin, there's no way that they would listen. There's no way.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing that NATO wasn't pulling its weight. If you're in the military over there, you'll know that. You don't have to lecture me about NATO not pulling its weight. I know better than you guys probably about NATO not pulling its weight.
We're not lecturing you. We're just having a conversation. We're not lecturing you.
However, having said that, the way he's doing it, it's just burning bridges a little bit too much, too fast. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, certainly that's Trump's style in general.
But getting back to my main point, I'm not changing Trump. What I'm saying is I'm soured on Vance now. And that was my second point before we went off on the Trump tangent. I am soured on Vance big time. I do not like this hawkish crap, that text message, the text messages for me, the big thing to take out of that was Vance's attitude. That brought it out into the light. He's never going to change. Nothing he can say on the campaign trail 3 years from now is ever going to change my view of him now.
Would you vote for Gavin Newsom instead? Would you vote for Gavin Newsom over him?
No, I would vote for absolutely anybody in the Republican Party that try to challenge him first, and then we'll see how it goes.
Got it. Good answer. Lucky, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it.
And I know that's a big uphill climb because he's Trump's boy, but I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous.
Long way to go.
A long way to go. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely.
And again, if you thought I was lecturing you, I apologize. I really just thought we were having a good conversation, and very much appreciate not just your service, but your participation and being part of Two Way. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Sean, real quick, what's the next beat today in this, with the hearing supposed to start now, but where do you think the signal story goes today?
Well, I'll say it again, what I said last night, which is, when a story or a crisis happens, the goal is to get all the oxygen out of the room and let it die within 48 hours. It got a little oxygen yesterday because President commented, Waltz commented on Laura Ingraham, and then there was a Senate hearing. I think today is the last attempt to throw oxygen in. I would expect House Democrats to be a lot more fiery than their Senate counterparts. So as long as they can keep their composure, and I think they did a great job yesterday, politically speaking, then I think that this could be the end of the story unless another shoe drops. Jeffrey Goldberg, he threw it all out there today, and unless something comes of this, I would assume that this is the end of the story. We didn't get to it today, but I think there was a big shift to add JD Vance to this Greenland story, and to the Greenland trip, rather. I'm sorry, with his wife. Yeah. I think that could also shift. Let's see where that goes on Friday when he goes over there.
Well, although his going actually some way ratchets it down because they're not going to the race now; they're just going to the military base, and so the trip is less of an affront to the Greenlanders than it was before. So adding him, I thought escalated. In fact, I think de-escalates it based on the reaction and the schedule change.
No more dog sled race.
Yeah, no dog sled. Dad, real quick, because we got to go.
Yeah, I just think Trump is the master at shifting the narrative, as Sean said. He loves to toss a red ball and have everyone go, comment on it. So I think between now and Friday, I'm sure they have something in their back pocket, and I would expect to see it, rolled out.
Sean, what do you have tonight on your show?
Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin.
That'll be good. All right. Meghan McCain happy hour, 5 p.m. Eastern time today. Don't miss it. Meghan is going to have lots to say about lots of stuff with her guests, James McWhorter and Kristen Lacefield. I'll be back at 6 p.m. Eastern time right after Meghan. My special guest to talk about the news of the day and his new book is Steve Hilton, the author, commentator, analyst, activist, sometimes Paul. So join me at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then don't forget Thursday night, special event only for two-way community members, not on Zoom, not on YouTube or X. David Bonson, whose Bonson Group sponsors Two-Way tonight, Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, right after this program. We'll be talking about the unpredictability in the economy and what you can know about it. Great chance to ask David questions. And of course, also, I recommend you subscribe to his Dividend Cafe. You can both sign up to the event and sign up for the newsletter, both free for Two-Way community members, twoway.tv/TBG. I'm switching over to Michael Smerconish now. See you over there. See you both tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time again. And thanks everybody for watching and for our great hand raisers and questioners. Have a good day.